My name is Kent. I am one of the pastors here, and I'm curious about this. Are you a napper or not a napper? And by that I mean not do you nap, but if you had the choice, if you had remove all the barriers, would you nap or would you not nap? Okay, go ahead and talk to your neighbor for a second. Tell them, napper, not napper. Okay, it sounds like some of you have a strong opinion about that, okay? Where are we at? Nappers? Nappers? Okay, we are going to try to create a mood of peaceful rest here this morning. This is not a signal for you to nap now, just so you know. I am not a napper, and I've been trying to analyze that, and I think I figured out why. When I was a kid, we were forced to take naps, and my mom would lay down with us, and you know I have a twin brother, so it was hard to get us both to settle down at the same time. So my mother would lay between us, and in her hand she would have a stick. I'm not kidding you. There was a stick that peeled all the bark off and had a whole bunch of knobs on it, and she would lay there with that stick and say, "Nap." So to this day, I can lay down, but I cannot fall asleep. I don't know what's the deal. Okay, the passage I want to start with is a passage that talks about rest, and it's a surprising kind of rest. You see if you can hear it. It's from the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1. I'm going to start in Genesis 1:31 and read a couple verses into chapter 2. Genesis 1:31 to 2:3, and listen for what it says about rest, okay? Before we do that, though, I'll offer this blessing to you. The Lord be with you. Genesis 1:31, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. But the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. This is God's word, and it's true, and we can rely on it. Now, I have some photos here to help you kind of enter into the idea of peaceful rest. And the first one is one that maybe you've experienced on your own. What's better than a pet that rests with you, yeah? And when they come cuddling up to you real nice? Anybody enjoy that? I know I do. Okay, and now I've got another kind of an unusual animal. Anybody rest like that? Find some place to... Apparently this is not an uncommon pose in animal resting here, because we got another creature that also likes to rest the exact same way. Something about that does look peaceful, though, doesn't it? Do you know what animal gets the most sleep in a day? The animal that spends the longest time every day sleeping. Any guesses? Koala bears. Yeah, somebody said that, so koala bears. You know how many hours a day on average they sleep? 22 hours a day. Anybody up for that? Yeah. Okay, the next five tie, they all sleep around 20 hours a day. The pocket mouse, the brown bat, lions, tigers, and pythons. Who would know if a python is sleeping for 20 hours a day? I don't know. And then the next one on the list sleeps for 19 hours a day. It's a walrus. Does that look peaceful to you? I never thought of a walrus being peaceful in its sleep. But of course, there is nothing that says peaceful sleep like a sleeping baby, right? Oh, if that doesn't give you calm and peace, I don't know what will. Maybe the next picture will, because this is the picture I have in mind when I think of the phrase sleeping like a baby. Any of you who had babies, they slept like this all the time, right? Yeah, right. Okay, so I don't know if this puts you in the mood or not, but I want us to enter into this idea of thinking about peaceful rest. And it's actually part of the journal prompt for this week, and the prompt is, what prevents me from getting peaceful rest? So if any of you have trouble napping or sleeping at night, you may be asked this particular question. And there's kind of a physical component to this question of like, yeah, there are things that keep us from getting good sleep. And sometimes we want to try to figure that out. Maybe you've already asked this question about your physical sleep. But I want to try to shift the focus a little bit to not just talk about sleep, but to actually talk about the rest that we need for our souls. Is there something that keeps your soul from resting peacefully? Something that keeps you restless? That's what we really want to try to figure out today. And those people who talk about sleep generally talk about this. They say the best way to good sleep is to follow a pattern, to get into a rhythm, like go to bed at the same time every night, and you'll go through a certain step-by-step process getting ready for bed. And I found that in my life this is true. Every night, I go through the same exact kind of steps to get myself ready to lay down and go to sleep. And when I do those steps, it works. I usually fall asleep quite quickly and I sleep soundly. If that pattern is ever disrupted, well, that can be a problem. If I get called out, I have to stay up late, or I don't do all my steps, then I find I don't fall asleep quickly, and I can be very restless if I miss that little window of sleep. So rhythm, pattern is really important for sleep. It made me wonder if it was important for getting rest for our souls. And the experts who look at this stuff tell us that it is, in fact, very important if you'd like to find rest for your soul, peaceful rest, to find that there's some rhythm that can be established, a pattern that can help you do that. And that is exactly what I want to look at today, and we're going to do this for the next 4 weeks. We're going to look at the pattern or the rhythms that help us find peaceful rest. And what we're going to encourage you to do, as already mentioned, is journal about this. And I know I started on this particular question earlier this week because I was thinking what would be a good prompt. What keeps me from peaceful rest? And the very first prompt I had was one big word I wrote underneath that question. You know what keeps me from peaceful rest? Worry. That there's like a switch I flip and then I'm like toss and turn. Physically and in my soul, I can feel like I'm out of rest. So I really designed a sermon to help me find peaceful rest, and I thought maybe it could help you too. What I want to do is give 3 steps, a rhythm, a process that can maybe help us enter into this peaceful rest for our souls. And we have a particular technical name for that in Christianity. We call that rest, Sabbath. So we've been looking at different practices that help us grow in our faith. We've looked at abiding in the Word and abiding in prayer and fasting. Now we're shifting gears to this new practice of Sabbath rest to try to find peace for our souls. And what I'm going to suggest is this. The first step is remember the Sabbath. Simple enough? Now the creation story we just read ends with divine rest, which I find surprising. This is what it said in that passage, Genesis 2. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Now, the surprising thing to me when I read that is like, really? Is like God worn out? Like, was this 6 days of work too much for him, and now he needs to take a nap? That's not what's going on here at all. What we're told in this passage is this. After creation, God did not rest from fatigue. He rested from fulfillment. He looked at everything that he had done, and it was very good, and he's like, I'm finished. It's done. I don't need to do anything else. That is the kind of rest that he's talking about here. God was so delighted in the goodness and completion of his work that he rested from it, and he actually established then a day, a sacred day, to remember God's good work. This is what makes the Sabbath special. We stop to remember God's good work. Sabbath. Now, there's some very interesting language in these couple verses, and it has to do with God being done. Now, is anybody familiar with this phrase? You've said, it's not done until it's done. Have you heard that? There's a company that has that on the side of their vans, done. It's not done till it's done, right? Yep. So in this passage, Sabbath comes from the word Shabbat. It's a Hebrew word, Shabbat, which means stop. Okay? And then after Shabbat, comes the Hebrew word that is finished or done. And the interesting thing about Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3, is that these concepts are all repeated multiple times. So if we're going to read this verse the most literally, it would read like this: God stopped because he was done. That's what it actually says. And in case you missed it in verse 2, verse 3 actually repeats the same thing. God stopped because he was done. And because God stopped after he finished, he says, you should remember that and you should stop too. Trusting that God has done good work and it's finished. You don't need to add anything to it. There's nothing else that you could add to it. In fact, this is so important. By the time we get to the book of Exodus and he gives the 10 commandments, the fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Listen to why we remember this. This is Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So we, today, are supposed to remember way back to creation and the day God was done, so he stopped, so you should stop too. That's what this passage is telling us. God says, remember my stopping by stopping. You can't add to anything I've already done. It's finished. It's completed. It's done. Remember, it's completed work. Remember, it was very good work. Remember, this is the world that he created for Adam and Eve. He placed people into this world. And remember this, Adam and Eve were created on the sixth day, the last thing God created. And then what'd they do the first day of their existence? Nothing. They stopped because the first day of their existence was the Sabbath. So they stopped to celebrate God's done, his good work. In fact, trouble comes into this picture when Adam and Eve start to strive to do their own thing. They say, we're going to take matters in our. God has given us all these good gifts, but we want one more thing. So we're going to strive to do something. We're going to do so we can get the thing God didn't give us. And their striving then creates all kinds of problems. It disrupts the harmony of creation. It introduces actually a whole legacy of brokenness that we experience right down to today. And one part of that brokenness is restlessness. Because Adam and Eve's disobedience got passed on to their sons, especially to Cain. And you remember what Cain did? He killed his brother Abel. And as a consequence of his disobeying God and killing his brother, here's the curse that comes on him, Genesis 4:12. You will be restless. Restlessness is a direct consequence of disobedience to God. And it's a legacy that started with Adam and Eve and get passed on to their kids and then all the way to us, to today. One way for us to address this is to remember the Sabbath. To remember our dependence on God, remember his good work, and it's finished. One of the saints, St. Augustine, said it this way. He said, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. We're all going to be cursed with restlessness unless we can find a way to trust in God. And it starts, the first step into this rhythm, remember the Sabbath. The second step is to reclaim the Sabbath. So we're remembering stopping is important, Sabbath is important. Now we have to reclaim it because sometimes we have some bad ideas about what it is. I don't know how many of you grew up in a tradition like I did, but I grew up in a tradition that had a very strict Sabbath day understanding, a lot of rules. So here's the kind of home I grew up in. On the Sabbath, you don't go swimming, you don't go to the movies, you don't go bowling, you don't go out to eat, you don't go shopping, you don't do anything fun. That was the Sabbath rule in my house. Okay, you go to church and you take a nap with mom holding a stick. That's the kind of house we had. So basically, if there's anything fun to do, don't do it on the Sabbath day. And this was a mentality that we had. We were not that different from the Pharisees in the New Testament who had all kinds of rules about Sabbath keeping. And the rules became more important than the Sabbath. And so they couldn't even do good things on the Sabbath because it was against the rule to do good things. And we could have used, like the Pharisees, a lot more of Jesus from Mark 2:27, where Jesus says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Like, hey, can we relax these rules a little bit? I think I tried that verse on my parents a few times to try to get permission to do something. It did not work because we were very strict. For the next 4 weeks, what we want to do is we want to explore the true meaning of Sabbath and reclaim it, that it's not a drudgery, it's not a pain, it's a delight, it's a joy. And we're going to do that by looking at 4 components of what we do on the Sabbath. Sabbath is about stopping, resting, delighting, and worshiping. So these are the 4 things that we do. We do stop. We cease from all of our striving, from all of our normal work. We do rest, and that's not just physical rest, like I'm not doing hard physical labor like I normally do, but I'm resting my soul. And we do delight. One component we definitely missed is the joy of Sabbath. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. And then worship. Because we've stopped, we've rested, and we've delighted, we can abide with God in new and fresh ways and worship Him in really deep and meaningful ways. So over the next 4 weeks, what we're planning to do is we're going to spend 1 week on each of these 4 components. A week on what it means to stop, what it means to rest, what it means to delight, and what it means to worship. This, we hope, will reframe maybe some bad ideas we have about Sabbath, but it will also reframe the cultural idea about Sabbath. Because you know what? We live in a world that glorifies busyness. Like if I ask you, hey, how you been? What you been doing? You say, I've been busy. And that's supposed to be like good news, like honor. Oh, bless you for being busy. We need to reframe that to recognize Sabbath. And so what we're hoping happens as we look at these things, that we learn to live in a world where busyness is not a badge of success, where our motto is not do more, where we're not constantly cramming our schedules full of do, that we don't find our worth or our value in productivity and in what we've done, what we've accomplished. Sabbath offers a rhythm that gives our souls precisely what we need the most, and that is a break from all the doing, from all the striving, from all the achieving. Now, you know I'm preaching to myself when I talk about this because I am definitely a guy who's wired to say a big part of my value has always come from what I can accomplish, from what I can do. I need to reclaim that because that's not a Sabbath mindset. That's a worldly mindset. And I'm working on that. So Sabbath then becomes a rhythm that is a gift instead of a duty. It's a delight instead of drudgery. It's space. Sabbath creates space so that our souls can get the rest that we need. So the first step would be to say we're going to remember the Sabbath. The second step would be we're going to reclaim the Sabbath. And then the third step is we're going to reorient the Sabbath. So we're going to try to reorient how we think about the Sabbath and its accomplishments. Now, spiritual practices generally are designed to help us grow. And we've used the image a lot about the vine growing and the branches in the vine, and it grows slowly until it can bear fruit. And if it's growing healthy, it'll bear much fruit. That's kind of a common image. We've also been using these chairs as a way to remember this. We've said that growth is a progression, that it maybe starts and down here you're maybe curious about spiritual things, or you want to know more about Jesus, or you feel like there's a calling, there's something in you saying, I need Jesus, but you haven't quite put your trust in Him yet. At some point we cross the line of faith and we say, I trust in Jesus. Now I'm a new believer and I say, I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to follow, whatever that means. And as we grow, we get to the point where we discover, well, now God has made me in a special way, and He's given me unique gifts, and I have an opportunity to serve other people with those gifts. And then if we keep growing, we go to the chair where we say maybe we're in leadership, maybe we are reproducers. So now I'm invested in other people who do not yet know Christ or who are new in Christ. I invest in helping them grow in maturity. And so this is a progression. One of the dangers we've noticed in using these chairs to illustrate this is it tempts us to think that it's like static, like growth is static. Like you get to this chair and then you just sit there until you're ready to leap over to this chair and then you get to sit there. This isn't how growth works, is it? Growth is definitely a continuum. It's progress. Like think of the vine. When I put the vine in the ground, it's like a little seedling, I stick it in the ground. The next day I got a full-grown vine? That's not how growth works. A vine grows little by little and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We use a trellis then to train the vine so that it can be healthy and strong and start to bear fruit. If I get a vine that's there, the next day I got fruit. No, I don't get fruit that quick. I get little growth, and then pretty soon there's a little fruit on there, and that fruit gets bigger and multiplies. This is a progression. So we definitely want to think of this growth as a progression. One of the best spiritual practices to help us recognize the continuum or the progression of spiritual growth is Sabbath keeping, because it does a reorienting work, and we know that reorienting work is big work that happens in little tiny steps, one step at a time. That you don't just wake up one morning and you're like mature. You don't wake up just one morning, you got the thing all straight. And so we're going to talk about the different things that Sabbath reorients us in progressions, and there's 4 of those also. We're going to talk about how Sabbath reorients time, how it reorients work, how it reorients priorities, and then how it ultimately reorients our trust. Now, we are tempted sometimes to believe that like we're masters of our own fate, like we actually have control of our own calendars, right? We don't. Part of the reason we have that is because we have to reorient our entire vision of how time works. If I was to ask you, when does your day start? What's your answer? Most people say, my day starts when my alarm goes off. My day starts when I wake up, right? Is that how we're wired to think? So I get up and I get going, because that's the beginning of a new day. And I get all the things I got to get done now the day has started. Sabbath mindset is going to reorient our thinking about when the day starts to shift it like this. You know what the Hebrew concept of the day starting is? When does the day start? At sunset. That's when the day starts. And one of the first things we do in a new day, we go to bed. And while we're sleeping, for our 8 or 10 or 22 hours, however long we're sleeping, while we're sleeping, God is working. So here's how the day starts. The day starts at night with God doing what God does. And what does God do? He does good work. The things that he works on get finished. They get done. That's what God does. And when I wake up, you know what I do? I join God in his work. I find out what is God working on, and I'm going to join him rather than starting with my alarm going off. So this is a reorientation. It's a rethinking of our time. And I'll tell you, this is a huge shift, and it's tough. It happens in little increments. I've been working on this for a long time, and I still can't get it straight. I'm still tempted to think when my alarm goes off, my day starts. I'm also tempted to think this. I'm tempted to think that my week starts on Monday. So Monday morning, when my alarm goes off, I think it's the beginning of a new day, the beginning of a new week. You know when the week starts? Sunday. That's when the week starts. And what's the first thing we do in the week? Stop. That's what we do. And why can we stop? Because God's already done everything he needs to do. And this is a rhythm. It like creates this trellis that starts to shape us and form us so that we can be strong and healthy and bear fruit. It happens in increments. And this influences our understanding of work then too. So with the wrong vision of work, I think my value comes from what I do. My identity comes from my work. My worth is from the things I've accomplished, the things I get done. That's what my worth comes from. Sabbath completely reorients this thinking and says, you know what? Your identity is in Christ. Your identity comes from God. That's where your identity comes from. So reorient yourself, and one of the best ways to do that is to say, once a week, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to say, God, you made me. I'm done. I don't need to add anything to what God has done. It also starts to reorient our priorities then too, because we start to go, well, do I have to strive harder? Do I have to do more? Do I have to accomplish this? Do I have to find my purpose? No, you don't. What you have to do is recognize, I love the song we sang, I depend on you. That's it. So my priority, and the thing that gets shaped in this trellis of the Sabbath, is I go, God, I'm weak. I need help. I need you. You're my priority. It's not doing, it's not accomplishing, it's not work. My priority is you. And then ultimately, the reorienting that happens then is I go, I can trust you. I can depend on you. Can you depend on God? Yeah. And if you want to reorient to even a stronger vision of that, then once a week, stop, and tell God his work was really good. And it's done. What this does then is it starts to help us enter into this Sabbath mindset, so we recognize we do not have to do more. We do not have to kind of constantly buy and sell more. We do not have to constantly measure up. We don't have to constantly keep up with the neighbors. We don't have to constantly send our kids to ballet and soccer and baseball and whatever, that we can stop. We don't have to keep striving, that we can stop, and it's okay. That's what Sabbath does. And this is a huge reorientation, probably because of our baggage about Sabbath and because of our cultural baggage. We need to work on this. And so we're going to do that for 4 weeks. Now, I'm curious if you're willing to engage this process, but before you do that, I want to truth in advertising. Here's what I'm really going to warn you about this. Sabbath invites us to address one of the most vital and difficult truths. This is what we have to confront in Sabbath rest. We have to confront this truth. We are sinners. We are weak. We are fragile. And we absolutely need God to do his work. Because if God doesn't do his work, it will never get done. That's what we're saying with Sabbath. We're saying it's a deeper restlessness. It's not just being tired and weary, but it's like a symptom of our sin. So at its core, restlessness reflects this like rebellion that we have. So Sabbath is about our sin, not about our schedules. That's what it's really about. And so we're going to be inviting over the next 4 weeks to work on that particular thing. I guess, are you ready for that? Are you ready to face it? And if you are, here's a couple next steps. The first next step is this: celebrate Sabbath. 1 day a week, 24 hours a week. Now, for many people, I would highly recommend Sunday. And the main reason we do this as Christians is because of Easter, because of resurrection, because Jesus rose from the dead, and that same power is at work in us. So we worship on Sunday because of Christ and the resurrection. And for many of us, that's a Sabbath. That doesn't work for everybody because of obligations or work schedules, things like that. Pick a day, okay? So I'm asking you to think about that. Maybe in your journal, jot down, this day will be my Sabbath day. And then after you do that, you start prompting or following the journal prompts that we're going to give you. And the first one is, what prevents you from getting peaceful rest? And the first thing might be, you don't have a Sabbath. You haven't remembered it. Or maybe you need to reclaim some stuff from baggage that you have about Sabbath. Or maybe you just need to keep reorienting something like worry so that you can trust more deeply. Do the journaling. Maybe bring your journals with you so you can take notes while we're at it, but definitely go home and follow up on that. And then the third next step I'm going to suggest is this: commit to doing this for 4 weeks, 4 Sabbaths. Like, come here 4 weeks in a row and be with God's people and find out what it means to stop, what it means to rest, what it means to delight, and what it means to worship. And then practice Sabbath keeping for 4 weeks. And then see if it doesn't do a little bit of reorienting in your life. That's the next step challenge I have for you today. And I want to end with a picture that I thought was super motivating for me. I hope it'll motivate you too. This is my image of what it means to Sabbath rest. To be able to throw your arms open and go, okay, God, I trust you. And to remind us that do is never equal to done. There's no way you can do your way into rest. You can only stop your way into rest. So throw your arms open and say, stop, once a week, and celebrate and remember God's done. This invitation from Jesus from Matthew 11:28, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." God wants to give us rest. He wants rest for our souls. We thought one good way for us to begin entering into this would be to sing a little lullaby to you. And relax, I'm not going to sing it to you. I've asked Leah to sing a little lullaby to help get us in the frame of mind of yeah, we can enter into this rest and we can start. And there's no hurry, there's no rush. We're just going to relax and rest in God's done.
To see him face to face. May the peace of the Lord forever rest on you. May the hope of his love bring you everlasting peace. For to rest in his love is to rest in his grace, and to gaze in his heart is to see him face to